صباح الخير. Bonjour. Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Jihad Ghanem. I am the moderator of this panel, the panel of the 22nd meeting of the contracting parties to the Barcelona Convention. I am a member of the coordinating unit of the Mediterranean Action Plan, Barcelona Convention Secretariat based in Athens, and I'm really delighted to be the moderator today. On the panel, we have what I would describe as a beautiful Mediterranean palette of skill sets, walks of life, and experiences. I will start maybe from my left with Professor Ilham Ali, who has kindly responded to and accommodated our request to be a member of the panel. Professor Ilham Ali is a professor of oceanography at the Suez University in Egypt, and she is the lead author of the 60th assessment report. We saw earlier a few elements presented by Erika Coppola from the IPCC in Geneva, and to her left we have Lefteri Sarapakis, who comes from Greece. He is a social entrepreneur, an award-winning social entrepreneur. And to his left, we have Dina Abdul Malak, who comes from the University of Malaga. She is the director of the ETC, the European Topic Center, and she specializes in ecosystem-based management, among other disciplines. We have Professor Yakup Kashka, who comes from Turkey, who comes from the University of Pakumule, if my pronunciation is right, which, if my understanding is correct, means cotton castle, due to some special geological formation in the region, in the beautiful region he comes from in Turkey. And to his left, we have Shahika Ekumen, who is UNDP Turkey Goodwill Ambassador for SDG 14, and who is also an athlete and a free diver. And with this quick introduction, let me start by asking Professor Ali to zoom in a little bit on what we saw earlier, the IPCC presentation on the findings of the IPCC 6th assessment report. It's not exactly a presentation on the findings, but it's a narration, more or less, on the broad directions. Could you zoom in on what's happening in our Mediterranean region, especially in terms of risks, uncertainty, and give us some insights on how we can plan under uncertainty? You can speak either here or there. It's as you like. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first say that I'm very glad to be here representing the IPCC current family. And before I speak about the IPCC, I would like to first thank the COP22 team for their invitation, and thanks to Ms. Tatiana Hima and her team. Thanks also to the host country, the Republic of Turkey, for their kind hospitality. It's a great pleasure to represent the IPCC current family and talk on their behalf. And I'm also very glad to be a Mediterranean woman scientist from Egypt. We are talking today about the climate change, which is a global phenomenon that's sharing its impacts to all of you, all of us. The AR6 report, which is currently prepared, as you all know, is not finally emerged yet. And I'm not allowed to talk narratively about the report, but we still have the chance to talk about the science behind it. This report is mainly, I think it's very much different than the AR6, which was the one before, in two main concepts. The first one is, this report is talking about two different aspects. The first one is talking about the thematic areas of science, and then they have like 3 chapters making analysis and integration of this information. They are using like 14,000 citations in this report, and we will have lots of integration and analysis that could be a very good and strong baseline information for decision making for the whole globe. What is really matter for this meeting and for the Mediterranean community is that we already in this report have a full chapter. It's not very long, it's like 10 pages size, but it's very concrete, very condensed, with lots of available literature available at the moment. This chapter is dedicated to the Mediterranean basin, and it deals with all the adaptation, vulnerability, and the impacts that happened to the Mediterranean previously, current, and gave some prediction to the future as well. This report, if we are saying that globally all the coastal environment and the marine environment are very impacted by the climate change, but talking about the Mediterranean, I can say as an oceanographer, Mediterranean region is one of the hottest spots impacting by the climate change, and it is one of the most areas in the world that are very quickly changed due to the climate change. It is even starting to lose what we previously called the Mediterranean climate by changing the climate every decade. I can say that the Mediterranean is have risks for the climate change, but in different special resolution. But at the end, we can say the whole Mediterranean basin are impacted by the climate change. For example, we are talking about water scarcity, for example, especially in the southern eastern part, and it's followed by the drought phenomena, which is most of the countries will be facing this problem, I think, in the near future. We are talking about floods, erosion, salt intrusion, and other related phenomena. For example, we can say that the surface temperature of the Mediterranean now, we are documented that it increased by 1.5 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial level. And it is increased by 0.2 to above 0.4 degrees centigrade per decade. This is since 1980s. And this will lead to a huge increase in the sea level rise, which is another risk, another key risk for the Mediterranean. We are saying that it is increased with a rate of 1.4 to maybe 1.5 millimeter per year during this century. If we are talking about precipitation, which is very important climatic factor, we are waiting or perceiving that it will be decreasing in most areas of the basin, and we will soon have a different rainfall map for the whole basin. And this will followed by some heavy rain in some places, mainly will be the northern, and we have some droughts at other places, mainly will be southern and the western part of the basin. If we are talking about coastal floods and the consequent negative impacts, mainly on the low-lying areas like the deltas. For example, in Egypt, we are suffering from low-landing area in the delta. Some other places like Italy, the Venice, and actually I was prepared the 2 slides to be presented in front of you. It's my own work, but I think for technical problem, we cannot display them. I can lift them in the website of the project of this meeting, and you can look at. One of the main sectors that we are deeply discussed in this report is the agriculture sector. You all know that agriculture is one of the main sectors in all the Mediterranean basin, which accounts for about 6.7% of the total Mediterranean GDP. This is an estimation of 2016. This would be vigorously impacted either through the saltwater intrusion or even by the decrease of the rainfall. And also sometimes we have some soil problems as well. Similarly, we have the fisheries. The fisheries sector will be very much affected. Fisheries from the Mediterranean account for 3.4 billion USD a year. This will be impacted by the increased temperature, migration of fishes, and unendemic species. I don't like to say invasive, but it's unendemic species, and pollution as well. If we're moving to forests, which is one of the Mediterranean ecologically and socially important habitat, it's really exposed to wildfire, and I'm happy that His Excellency, Mr. the President, today said that there is 3 events One of them in Turkey, one of them in 2021 is about wildfire. And we expected to have wildfire increasing maybe in the northern and southern western part of the Mediterranean basin. And all these impacts will for sure affect the social and economic life of the Mediterranean population, and even affect the tourism. Tourism, in the Mediterranean accounts for like 1/3 of the global tourism. And we have many countries that mainly rely on tourism activity like France, Spain, Italy, Greece, and for sure Turkey. The coastal tourism generates up to $300 billion a year, and then it's followed by the marine and the coastal tourism, which generates like about 100 billion USD. All these economically valuable activities will be impacted by the climate change, especially at the low-income countries, because they will be less resilient, more prepared for the adaptation, and even for the mitigation as well. What we need to do, I think what we are doing now is one of the main steps we can share to the Mediterranean community. We need to think to reduce all the risks, either the observed or the cascading or even the projected ones. We need to think of the green economy, to use the green energy, such as wind energy, waves energy, and sometimes we can go to the bioenergy as well. And the bioenergy, most of them are found in the marine, because it is one of the resources in the marine ecosystem. We need to change the vegetation map, use other crops, change the seasonality of cropping. We need also to do sharing. We need to improve the sharing of the knowledge between the Mediterranean community, and not also sharing the production of this, but even think how to produce this together, not based on individual country. Particularly for the adaptation practices, which is the long-term solutions, I think we cannot leave each country to think alone, because it's long, it needs a long strategy to sort this out. This will ensure better implementation and reduce the vulnerability within the Mediterranean basins, and I think no individual perception can work in this time. And we can benefit from even the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. We can see that we faced this problem globally, but each country defended differently. And I think we can take this as an example to think better for solving the problem of the Mediterranean basin. We need to minimize the gap between science and perception to increase the evidence and the certainty. I think it would be great to have some policies for the whole basin like we are doing now, and the last 3 days. It's worth mentioning here that we need to look at the indigenous and local knowledge, and because this is our key factor in setting the solutions. Not all the countries are behaving the same. What works in one country cannot work well with the other country. Yes, we need to think regionally, but we need to implement locally and even sub-locally. We need to also to minimize the gap in science and literature between the north and south, because this is one of the problems we faced. I am from the southern part of the Mediterranean, and I know that there is some gap in the literature, not only because of the minimum number of citation, but also some of finance, some of the problem of the publication and the availability of these publication as well. We would like to, this will draw the attention to the concept, the new concept. It's not very new, but I think it's new that for the Mediterranean is the climate justice and also the climate finance. At the end, it is very valuable to say that we are dealing with a unique basin, because we are talking about a basin that's surrounded by 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. We are talking about 500 billion people. This will be, this is 2020. This will be 750 in 2050, and will be 700 in 2010, 210. I think we need to have something regional to protect our marine basin, which is known as a very exceptional environmental and socio-cultural regional basin. And it is one of the unique habitat that we need to keep it sustained, and we keep the resources as we need to have the blue Mediterranean. Thank you.
Thank you. شكرا Professor Ali. شكرا على المداخلة, and thank you very much for this intervention. I think it was particularly insightful because it's not every day that we hear insights on this at this level. I think it's very important to understand, and I'm sure that many in the room already understand and appreciate the momentous nature of the challenge, but the extent to which it will change our way of life, our means and livelihoods, and you talked about agrarian or agricultural cycles. We're talking about the very foundation of our civilizations and our cultures in this basin that's unique. That's 1% of the global ocean, but home to almost 10% of the all known marine species. So it is very important, I think, to understand that climate change is a momentous overarching challenge that permeates through all sectors and affects us all in different ways, but we are in this together. Climate change also affects one of the iconic, emblematic species in the Mediterranean, marine turtles and careta careta. And we have today with us on this panel someone who has dedicated 33 years of his life studying marine turtles, both the loggerheads, the carnivore type, and the herbivore type. Without further ado, I'd like to ask Professor Kashka to talk about perhaps unusual ways and unexpected ways, to me at least, in which climate change affects marine turtles, and tell us more about how this particular iconic species, which is actually the emblem of COP22 of our meeting today, how it is grappling in its own way with the triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. The floor is yours, Professor Kashka.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for everyone to be at our panel here. And I would like to start by introducing actually two species of sea turtles nesting in the Mediterranean. Everybody knows obviously the careta careta, the loggerhead sea turtle, which is the carnivore and the jellyfish eater, mussel eater, but drops some of this food for the other animals in the biodiversity. So sharing his food and helping the small fishes that they can grow. But I would like to raise also another important species, which is the green turtle. The Latin name is a bit difficult to pronounce, Chelonia midas. That's why probably it's not known as much as the careta careta, which is the easily can be repeated, the same word twice. And the green turtles are the gardeners of the Mediterranean. They are the vegetarian, they eat seagrasses. And the seagrasses obviously produces oxygen for entire marine basin. And that's why I call them the gardeners of the Mediterranean basin. As we are cutting our grasses in our gardens at home, then they are doing this job for freely, not asking any money. All we need to do is help and protect these two species. And obviously the Posidonia seagrasses, and we are all talking about climate change is also affecting the distribution of these seagrasses, and probably they are losing the locations in the Eastern Mediterranean and moving towards the back. Obviously, coming back to the climate change, which is the very challenging issue, I will just raise the 2 points for the turtles. One is the sea level rise, what we'll be talking about. And sea level rise means losing of their natal nesting beaches. They depend on the beach they born. They always come to the same beach for continuous nesting. So what will happen if the beach is staying under the water in 50 years' time or 100 years' time? So we are going to lose some of the nesting beaches, And there may be some new nesting beaches. That's why we started having sporadic nestings. You know, maybe you don't hear, but we had one green turtle nest in Libya last year, one in Tunisia, and one in Greece. So maybe green turtles are already colonized in the Far East Mediterranean, Turkey, Cyprus, and on these beaches, but they started moving west. It is the same for loggerhead turtles as well. We started having loggerhead turtle nests in the Aegean coast of Turkey, including Albania, and Italy and Spain also have sporadic nestings. So their nesting is also changing. But more important than this is their sex. Not like ours. Our sex is determined by the sperm of our fathers. When we get into the womb of our mothers, our sex is already determined. But it's not the case for turtles. Turtles don't have sex chromosomes, and their sex is basically determined by the temperature of the sand during the incubation period that stay in the sand for about 2 months. If the temperature is warmer, they are all becoming females. If the temperature is lower, they are becoming males. So we are getting nearly 80%, 90% of the hatchlings are female already. And just imagine that 1 degree of Celsius increase in the near future will make them all female. So how we are going to let them to survive in this world? So this is another challenging information. But I will give you a few other examples that why we need to protect the sea turtles. I will give you from our life. You know, when we face difficulties, we always say that, oh, I cannot do this, it's too difficult, and so on. You know, the hatchlings almost half of our hand size, 5 centimeters in length. And they buried at about 50 centimeters of the sand, nearly 10 times of their body size. But at the time of emergence, they have to crawl up of all this sand and able to reach to the sea. Not able to reach all of them, but if we try to help them during this process, we are not helping them to survive. The best way of protecting them is let them to crawl and they emerge from this sand, because they are cleaning the remains of the blood, the remains of the yolk, so that they cannot be eaten by the predators when they enter into the sea. If we take them and drop them into the water directly, then predators like big fishes immediately eat them. So it's not going to help them to survive in the nature. Obviously, when the hatchlings are entering to the sea, they are not coming back to the beach where they born for about 25 years. That's why we call this as a lost years. And during these lost years, and also the young ones, subadult ones, juvenile ones, we don't know where they are visiting. They are going to feed on some food in Tunisia maybe, or in Egypt, or someone, the famous turtle tuba, went into the Adriatic, visiting the Albania, Montenegro, close to the Croatia, and so on. But that turtle nested in Turkey, and we're still following this turtle for last 2-3 years. This is the longest period that we have been following them. We are attaching a GPS device on their shells, and we are getting the signals, and we are following their food paths. And the 2 of the turtles later this afternoon, we are going to release with these satellite tags, and we will be understanding their foraging grounds, their wintering grounds. The beaches are important, but the feeding grounds, wintering grounds are also very important in order to let them to survive. And also, we are calling them the ambassadors of the sea, because they don't need to get a visa to come out of one country and to enter the other countries' waters, like the tuba. She already visited the Greece, Malta, Italy, Albania, Montenegro, Croatia, and so on, not taking any visa. So that's why we call them ambassadors of the sea. Obviously, biodiversity loss is very important, and it is the case for sea turtles. And the bycatch issue is one of the next challenges after the global warming and also the habitat loss. Biodiversity loss is very important. From the fisheries interaction, in 1 year, we are getting nearly 132 individuals of turtles trapped in the nets, and 40,000 of these killed every year. And this is very challenging issue. That's why in recent years, we are developing mitigation trials, putting the LED lights on the net so that the turtles can see the net and not entangle. This is one of the approach that we've been applying right now. The other thing is changing the shape of the hooks from the J type to the G type so that they cannot be entangled to the hooks. And the third one is the turtle exclusive device that attached to the troll nets. When turtles trap in them, they can go without in the collection port of it. The fishermen can keep collecting, but they can vanish from the escaping wall that we attach. I will also show one of these examples at the time of releasing of turtles. Obviously, these are mitigations, but one of the things that turtles are telling us, although they belong to the beach where they born, but they are visiting many countries. In order to protect these emblematic animals, charismatic animals, we need to make collaborations all among ourselves. And they may be nesting on one beach, they may be wintering in another country, and they may be spending more time in the other countries. That's why in the recent projects, we are collaborating nearly most of the countries in this panel and in this room. So collaboration of the Mediterranean countries is necessary. MAVA Foundation projects like the conservation of marine turtles in the Mediterranean, coordinated by the SPARAC, for example, and MedByCatch, and the European Union supported projects of Life Euro Turtle and the Life Med Turtles are examples of these good collaborations. And as I said, turtles are becoming adults after 25 years. In order to let them to survive in the near future, we need to take conservation efforts for minimum of 25 years so that we can see the output, we can see the result. So as our panelists mentioned, I've been spending my summertime since my university years on the beaches, protecting them, and we started receiving the mothers that I released from hatchling, and they started coming and making nests. We can understand this from the nest counts increases. We have now maybe around 20-25% of the nest numbers are increasing in the Mediterranean. So this is very important. And you know, this is also a good message. If the chance is given to the nature, it will bonus back. So like the turtles, we started getting the benefit of the nature, and we need to continue in the same type of conservation for 30 years. So we need to make long-term commitments. By saying this, I will just finish my speech, and thank you for everyone. And maybe later, if you have any questions, we would be very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Teşekkür ederim, Professor Kashka. What a beautiful account of a life of a turtle, starting with the first challenge, climbing up the sand, a distance 10 times bigger than its own size, and then making it to the sea, and then wandering around the basin during those lost years for a reason that we cannot fathom, but we can only respect. And I see this description, beautiful description you just made of the life of the emblem of COP22 as perhaps as a metaphor for nature-based solutions and the way we should perhaps live in harmony with nature, respect nature and give it, as you said, if given half a chance, nature will bounce back. And so speaking of nature-based solutions, and as I said earlier when I introduced the panel members, we happen to have an expert today, Ms. Dania Abdul Malak. She's an ecosystem-based management expert. She's an environmental researcher, senior environmental researcher, and as I said, director of the European Topic Center at the University of Malaga. When we talk about nature-based solutions, I think almost everyone in this room is already conversant with the concept, but what does it mean in practice? How can it work? If there are successful nature-based solutions, how can we ensure that they are scaled up and that they deliver? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jihad. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to this panel. Just to start a bit with a reflection that I think, it has been mentioned quite much these days, but clearly I think there is a warning, a sign of warning that we need to somehow envisage and understand, is that humanity is at a type of a crossroad. And there is quite some science that has been showing this and insisting on this, and the efforts are really going towards trying to mainstream responses to these three crises that have been mentioned several times, so the climate crisis, pollution, and biodiversity loss. So in a way, I think it's not new to just emphasize that biodiversity somehow is the foundation, right, of us, of our presence, and of our survival. Having this as an embedded, I think, point or concept, this makes us need to understand how ecosystems that we rely on and they host us work. Having said so, certainly, there are lots of efforts that have been done to protect. We heard that some percentages have increased and so on, but still the boundaries we are putting to protect our areas are not always based on the ecological function, right? Ecological function meaning how does ecology work? So we mentioned several important species and habitats. I would take seagrasses, for example. Most linked to the Mediterranean is the Posidonia oceanica. Of course, it is in the sea, but it has a very complex ecological cycles that takes it back to land, and it has lots of functions to maintain our dune systems, to feed fish, to store, to be in habitats as well for the fish we eat. So there are lots of ecosystem services that depend on each and every somehow habitat that hosts us. Having this in mind, that's coming from the ecosystem-based management approaches that need to be clear in our thinking. We need to understand the systems, the ecosystems, and how they function, and build our measures around them. So understanding these ecosystems, I think there's more and more science that is ensuring this. This needs to be the basis to set any mechanism linked to ecosystem-based approaches, not only to protect, but also to manage land and sea. So more importantly is to address these criteria, so the ecosystem-based management criteria, to be the basis for any management, any decision, and any governance that needs to happen. And this is, I think, an important point, and we are still not there. We are still protecting very small areas, managing others without really caring about the ecosystem as a whole. And there, I think there is an important point of collaboration, cooperation between different types of, I would say, stakeholders. Science needs to be the basis, and ecosystem needs to be somehow this boundary that we work around and try to manage, protect, and conserve, right? So having said this, it's just to mention that, ecosystem-based management approaches are key. They need to be mainstreamed in any decision, in any sectoral decision, and not only towards protecting biodiversity. This is, I think, an important point too, towards adaptation to climate change, toward conservation, and toward restoration of our habitats and ecosystems. So all the audience that we have here, it's the type of policy relevant people. So these are the decisions that need to be at the heart of any decision to influence any sector in the territories and in the countries in the Mediterranean. So starting from this humanity is at crossroads, knowing that overexploitation is still a major issue we face. And I think it's a moment where decisions need to go beyond sectoral representatives, and really there is a need to collaborate and work together. And that brings us to the nature-based solutions. So certainly as a reply to these challenges that we face, and understanding that nature really is the underlying point to which we all somehow depend on. So the solution to global challenges needs to build on nature, and that's where I guess the nature-based solution comes into the heart of any action that we need to be taking. Nature-based solutions have been clearly defined by the IUCN, and they include actions to protect, to conserve, to sustainably manage, and to restore natural ecosystems that address societal challenges where our livelihood depends on. They need to be done effectively and adaptively, and simultaneously to give importance to the human well-being, or solutions to the human well-being, and also that benefit biodiversity. And this is really important, because sometimes we look at what is for us a short-term benefit, but we don't look at what is really a longer-term benefit for this survival of biodiversity, and humans being part of that, of course. So nature-based solutions, they need to be treated as integral adaptation, so as integral component in adaptation strategies. So these strategies that are taken at different levels, from local level to national level to regional levels, they need to align with important solutions looking into this green infrastructure, right? Building on the biodiversity as a basis, that helps us to solve some solutions. So these are really transformative changes that I think need to happen at all levels. If we look, for example, at protection, so we need to protect all wide range of ecosystems, so at the same time, and this needs to happen. Part of these nature-based solutions need to look into all the ecosystems and need to do the right protection measures towards them. But also we need to restore, no? So restoring degraded habitats. In the Mediterranean there have been lots of degradation, mainly to coastal areas, but not only. Now the blue growth is really a threat coming to, I guess, yeah, if not sustainably done, it could have negative effects and degrade further our natural resources. So restoring degraded habitats is really important in the coast, on the sea, but also in our river basins, because that is really linked to the important ecosystem services that we benefit from, including fresh water, including the reduction of or the mitigation to extreme events such as extreme droughts and so on. Restoration also needs to come into the heart of our cities. So our cities are too grey in many cases, and they need to be greened, including the biodiversity component, of course. So they need to be more biodiverse, and that's for the sake of being nicer cities, but also for the sake of reducing heat waves effects, high temperature, making cities more pleasant. So this mainstreaming of nature-based solutions need to happen across all of the natural and also the modified ecosystems. And the sustainable management, of course, so we know there is overexploitation of quite some resources, including fisheries and so on, and all of this needs to be adaptive more towards more longer term, I would say, management approaches to benefit biodiversity and people. But so biodiversity needs to be at the foundation of all of these activities. We cannot just plant trees for the sake of planting trees. It needs to go into defining what type of trees are the most adequate ones, what is relevant for the area. So all of these are the type of criteria that we need to think about when we are planning all of our activities. And certainly towards the implementation of nature-based solution, this needs to rely on local people. So local people are the ones that have this indigenous knowledge, and they need to be the ones that are a big part or leading even in these implementations at different levels, especially at local level. And in that case, they are the ones that will be able to sustain these activities on the long term. So these are very important criteria that are closely linked to how we define nature-based solutions. I will not go into more of the ecosystem services that healthy biodiversity provides, including, as we said, healthy coastal ecosystems are crucial to protect local communities from extreme events. We have the restoration of slopes that is very important towards catching more water, towards ensuring and stabilizing soils and so on. Also, we need to green our agricultural practices, so there are so many solutions to this, including biodiversity as part, and I think there are some regions in the world that are leading on that in their policies. I do work at the European level, and I think there is a clear element from the EU Green Deal that is trying to green sectors that are really impactful, and there are lots of lessons learned that I think that could be done, taken from there. So finally, maybe a point that is linked to the restoration, so engaging in and scaling up effective restoration measures, protecting more effectively the environment requires people. So that requires somehow some economies that are linked to local population, and that will ensure the generation of valuable jobs and long-term jobs. So certainly all these investments to be done in nature-based solutions, they would have positive effects on local economies. Finally, I think that mainly as a take-home message from my side, how to ensure that this happens. I think we have been hearing also a lot, I don't want to repeat too much, but I think we need to shift really the way we do things. We need to shift into shifting the environmentally harmful subsidies and moving them into this type of investment that looks into nature to protect it, to restore it, and to conserve it. And without making substantial changes to the sectors that are the most impactful on the environment, I think we will not reach far. So this is really where the shift needs to happen, and this is where substantial, I would say, changes need to occur. How does this happen? I think it's really fundamental to ensure the willingness to act. So the will to act is really important, and that's, I think, addressed to this room. And to do so, I'm sure that this needs to be linked to financial policy instruments that motivate, that ensure that this happens, but that also are adaptive in terms of their monitoring. So monitoring the implementation is very important. It's a new area. It needs to be scaled up as many levels, and there's no recipe that fits all. So adaptive measures pushed by financial mechanisms to trigger a willingness to act, I think that's really fundamental. And that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Dania. I think your intervention was particularly relevant to the agenda of COP22 in many respects. You mentioned the need to enhance our knowledge of nature and of the environment, and this is an important component of the mandate of the UNEP MAP system. And this COP endorsed assessment studies, including the first Mediterranean assessment report conducted by the independent scientific network MEDEC. Actually, Professor Ali is also affiliated with MEDEC as part of her work on climate change. You also mentioned the role of cities, and this afternoon we'll have the Istanbul Environment Friendly City Award ceremony, during which Malaga, Spain, will receive the award for a number of achievements pertaining to what you outlined as important contributions that cities can, especially coastal cities, since we are in a marine and coastal context, can make to pursue this green agenda. You also provided important pointers towards concrete policy elements that can easily be implemented. Shifting or putting in place incentives, fiscal incentives, using fiscal instruments, phasing out harmful subsidies to set in motion this green recovery we would like to see in the Mediterranean. I would like to go back to the knowledge element, and of course there are the traditional ways of increasing our understanding of nature and its intricate workings, but there are other less traditional and less conventional ways, and one of them is pursued by a panel member today, Şahika Erkumen, who comes from Turkey, who flew specially to be a member of this panel, and I thank her for that. She's the UNDP Turkey advocate for life underwater, and she's an athlete. She's a world record holder, and she goes for frequent encounters with the depths of the Mediterranean, and she sees things that not many of us can see. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Şahika. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a great honor to be here and part of this meeting. I would love to continue my speech in Turkish, in my mother language. Açıkçası astımdan dolayı ben yıllarca evden çıkamayan bir çocuktum ve su sporlarına başladıktan sonra bir anda hayatım değişti. Derin mavi, özellikle Akdeniz'in mavisi benim tutkum. Ve her dalışımda limitlerimi yeniden keşfettiğimi, aslında o limitlerin zihnimizde olduğunu, o yerçekimsiz dünyayı merakla daha çok keşfetme isteğimi fark etmeye başladım. Ama bunun yanında da beni hayata döndüren suya olan minnet duygumla yaptığım her dalışı, özellikle her dünya rekoru denemesi dalışını bir sosyal amaca, bir sosyal projeye ithaf etmeye karar verdik. Ve en son rekorumuzu, 11. dünya rekorumuzu Antalya Kaş'ta tek nefeste paletsiz 100 metreye dalarak kırdık. Bunu da iklim krizine, içinde bulunduğumuz iklim değişikliğine dikkat çekmek için aslında bir noktada yapmış olduk. Bu yıllardır yaptığım çabalarımın hem Sayın Emine Erdoğan himayelerinde ve Çevre Şehircilik İklim Değişikliği Bakanlığımızın Sıfır Atık Mavi Projesi'nde beni elçileri olarak tanımlaması ve Birleşmiş Milletler Kalkınma Programı Türkiye'nin 14. küresel amaçlarından Life Below Water, sudaki yaşam savunucusu ilan etmeleri tabii benim için çok büyük bir onur. Asıl amaçlarımdan birine dünyada görmek istediğim o değişimlerin aktif bir parçası olmaya bu sayede bir adım daha yaklaştım onlar sayesinde. O yüzden onlara öncelikle çok teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Galiba beni daha derinlere dalmaya iten şey bu tutkunun yanında daha iyi bir gezegen içinde farkındalık yaratabilecek işler yapabilmek. O yüzden aslında ben nefesimi 6 dakika tutuyorum ya da 100 metreye dalmak istiyorum. Tabii su altında çok fazla şeyle karşılaşıyorum. Özellikle balinalarla, köpek balıklarıyla yüzmek, penguenlerle dalmak, buz altında dalışlar yapmak veya biraz önce Yakup Hoca'nın bahsettiği arkadaşları, yakın arkadaşlarım olan karetta ve Kelonya midaslarla dalışlar yapmak çok özel, nefes kesici. Fakat son yıllarda ben denizde balıklardan çok, deniz canlılarından çok plastiklerle yüzüyorum. Veya bir karettanın boynuna dolanmış ağı çıkartmaya çalışıyoruz. Ekranlarda bazen milyonlarca köpek balığının sadece yüzgeçleri için telef olduğunu görüyoruz. Veya geçtiğimiz yıllarda belki hatırlarsınız bir balinanın karnından yaklaşık 40 kilogram plastik atık çıktı ve can çekişerek ölmesi seyredildi. Tabii bunlarla karşılaşmak aslında benim son yıllarda daha çok ilgimi çekmeye başladı ve daha hızlı, daha şiddetli hareket etmemi gerektiğini bana gösterdi. O yüzden Birleşmiş Milletler Kalkınma Programı'yla pek çok farkındalık çalışmamız, belgesel çalışmalarımız, suyun altında yaptığımız aktif deniz temizliği ve sudaki yaşamı gösterme etkinlikleri de çok hızlandı ve bu boyutta devam ediyor. Ben suyun altında gördüklerimden yola çıkarak naçizane belki şunları söyleyebilirim. Yani deniz evet benim evim ama hepimiz için denizel biyoçeşitlilik ve denizlerin korunması çok çok önemli. Hem insan sağlığı hem gezegen sağlığımız için çok önemli. O yüzden tüm bu çalışmaları, tüm bu koruma çalışmalarına denizlerden başlayarak mavi gezegeni korumak için herkese harekete davet etmek istiyorum. Çok teşekkürler. Because I was part of Antarctic scientific research in Antarctica, and I was doing some free diving there. And after the research, I was helping the scientists to collect some underwater samples. But after some of the research, they told me that they found out some microplastics in Antarctica, which no one lives there. So this was quite interesting, experience for me as well.
Interesting, thank you. So, how do we deal with this marine litter issue? Of course, there are policies for that, and I think fora such as the meeting of the contracting parties to the Barcelona Convention is a place and a forum for discussions and also technical discussions and policies to enact them and to introduce measures to stem the flow of this littering our beautiful sea. But there are also initiatives, social initiatives, private initiatives from committed young men and women, and our panel member Lefteris Sarapakis is one of them. He's an award-winning social entrepreneur. In 2020, he was announced as the UNEP Young Champion of the Earth for Europe, precisely for his work for the environment in many innovative ways. So I will let him introduce his work.
I know that I'm probably the last intervention before the lunch break, so I'll try to be to the point and not to bore you very much. So it's really an honor that I'm invited to be among you today and to talk about climate crisis. To be honest, I'm not a scientist or a politician, so my experiences are mainly personal. Over the last 20 years, I've been hearing my father, who is a fisherman, and his friends complaining that every year they fish less and less fish, and every year they find more and more plastic in the sea. Through our work with the fishing communities in Greece, Italy and Kenya, I was shocked to see that it's actually the same pattern. From Piraeus to Corfu to Ancona to Kwale, the fishing communities are facing the same challenges. Our oceans and seas are interconnected, and this is how plastic ends up in Antarctica or the Mariana Band. But not only our seas are interconnected, our challenges are also. CO2 emissions and marine pollution don't recognize borders, and they are creating havoc to our seas and communities alike. I think at this time, maybe we need to address the climate crisis to its real extent. I'm afraid we are not speaking anymore only about the protection of the marine and land ecosystems. Currently, we are talking about the protection of our way of living, of our societies, of our economies, and of our culture. This summer I was in Rimini, and the fishing community there was complaining to me about the ghost gear they encounter at the sea. This plastic goes and traps in their propellers and creates them thousands of euros of damages every year. I hear same stories from the fishing communities in Piraeus and Thessaloniki, to name but a few. A few months ago, we were in Ithaca, this famous island from Odyssey. And there, together with many partners, we implemented a massive marine plastic cleanup. A fish farm became bankrupt around 10 years ago, and they decided to throw their equipment at the sea, making this part of the island dangerous and not suitable for fishing or tourism. Tons and tons of ghost gear, plastic pipes and microplastic were flooding the island, the coastline, and even the hills. After we restored the ecosystem there, human activity, but also the marine environment, were able to bounce back, as was mentioned from the previous panelists as well. Last month, Athens had a terrible thunderstorm, creating millions of euros in damages in just a few days. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the climate crisis is here. I think we have seen too many movies, most of them from Hollywood, and we're expecting an environmental catastrophe that will happen overnight, maybe 2030, maybe in 2050, if we fail to meet the SDGs. But the reality is different. This climate crisis, this environmental and social catastrophe, is going to come very slowly, a daily, slowly process. And I'm afraid it's already here. And here, in the Mediterranean, we will face it first than the rest of the world. And this is why we need to act now. This is why we, in Antalya, started to act. We know we will not change climate crisis, or we cannot solve the marine pollution issue. But what we know is that we will do our best within the sphere of our control to prevent these catastrophes from happening. I'm coming from a long line of fishermen, and I decided to break the chain and decided to train the fishermen to fish smarter, fish less, but earn more revenue. During our fishing trips in Cyclades, I was shocked to see that the fishermen are collecting in their nets not only fish, but also plastic. Lots of it. But they are just throwing it back to the sea. Plastic bottles from the 80s, aluminium cans from the various World Cups, and of course, ghost gear full of skeletons of fish and marine mammals. That's why we started to train our local community of fishermen in Piraeus port. And now, almost 2 years later, we are working with 1,500 fishers from Greece, Italy, and Kenya, collecting the equivalent of 2 trucks full of plastic from the sea daily. Over our journey, we found recycling and upcycling partners. And now, more than 70% of that material is integrated into the circular economy and creates new products, such as my shoes. I don't know if you can see that. But also these socks that are made out of ghost gear. I guess that social entrepreneurs and civil society organizations can lead the way. But this is not enough. We cannot solve the crisis ourselves. We need governments, institutions, industry to take up global action, to take up really important work. There are many studies that are indicating that if we just use 2% of our global GDP and invest it in green technology and sustainable initiatives, we'll solve the crisis once and for all. Just 2%. Or our economies and governments are not able to afford that investment, and maybe they are willing to pay 10, 20, or even 100 times that price in just a few years. I heard 2 days ago about the annual budget of UNEP-MAP, one of the leading organizations here in the Mediterranean against climate crisis. Around 15 million euros, if I'm not mistaken. This is the budget of a moderate yacht that is sailing in the Mediterranean Sea, one of the thousands. This is the budget of a small Greek football team. Is this how much attention and importance we are giving to climate change? Don't we understand what's happening? We are an initiative of youth, and we are taking action. Everybody in our team is from 22 to 35 years old. Young people can have results. Young people can bring impact. And that's why we should include them in these decision-making processes. We heard that today, but how? How should we do that? I'll share my personal experience on that. Over my journey, I had to conceal my age because most of the times that I was revealing how old I was, I had to deal with sarcasm, or even worse, neglect. I had to become a young champion of the earth by the United Nations to be taken seriously. And that should not be the case. Youth initiatives, social enterprises, civil society organizations can lead the way. And if I, a young person, coming from a fishing family in Piraeus, can mobilize thousands of fishermen and fisherwomen to collect plastic from the sea, then each and every one of you can mobilize their own networks to take real action against climate change. I would like to close my talk with 3 simple calls to action. The first one is to all the governments here and to the representatives of them. I'm asking you to start fishing for plastic and net collection initiatives in your countries. In that way, we could tackle even more than 20% of the total marine plastic pollution, since currently around 20% is just the ghost gear in our sea. I'm asking the representatives of the governments that are here today to support the declaration and the Marine Litter Agreement that will be formalized at UNEA. In that way, we can mobilize global action on this challenge. And finally, I'm asking the representatives of the governments that are here today to start real competitions and provide funding or investment to young initiatives, social enterprises, civil society organizations, startups, to provide solutions for CO2 emissions, for marine pollution. You might be surprised by what you will find after investing in your youth. You might create a green renaissance. I'm optimistic that we'll make it. I'm optimistic that we'll fight the climate crisis. And I'm optimistic because I'm seeing that the young people of the Mediterranean, but also the fishing communities of the Mediterranean, are proving that we can change our behaviors and we can change our mindset. What about you? Thank you very much.
Lefteris, thank you. I would like to ask you to stay there, actually, because yes, let's invest in youth. And I would like to invite PAPRAC Director, Madame Jelka Skaricic, to join us on the podium. And I'll explain why. Because Lefteris Arapakis, as I said, the UNEP Young Champion of the Earth for 2020, is also the Mediterranean Ambassador for the Ambassador for the Mediterranean Coast. It's a honorary title conferred on him by PAPRAC, which is a regional activity center of UNEP MAP. And the floor is yours, Madame Skaricic.
Every year, for 15 years now, PAPRAC honors with the title of the Ambassador for the Coast one of the persons who, through their dedicated work and engagement, contributes to the objectives of the Barcelona Convention and in particular of its ICZM protocol. Since this year it was not possible to hand over the award to our this year ambassador, Lefteris Arapakis, and I'm so proud after this inspirative speech he made. We thought it was, we did do it during the Mediterranean Coast Day celebrated every year on 25th of September. This year was not possible because of the COVID pandemic, so we thought this COP is a great occasion to hand over this award, to thank him and congratulate him for the great job he is doing to making our Mediterranean healthier and clearer, and to tell him that we count for him for the future as well. I'm so proud to give you this honor today.
Thank you very much.
Sinharitira, congratulations, Lefteri.
Thank you very much.
And I think that would be the, it will be a cap for this panel discussion. I really thank you for your attention, and I thank the members of this panel for making time and for waiting for the session to begin. Thank you very much again. And with this, while we leave the panel, I'll ask my colleagues to screen a video we have received from our hosts about the life and work of Captain June, who is an emblematic figure of the women and men who who have dedicated their life to the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Who would have known that a blue journey would become a never-ending journey, that a blue journey would dedicate a life to the nature that much. How do our values live forever? By leaving a legacy for future generations. Here is the person who has achieved it, Captain June Heimov. She is 95 years old and has an eternal legacy. Her passion for nature and her effort for the environment will keep her legacy alive forever. When Captain June arrived at the uniquely beautiful Dalian Beach, she thought of only one thing: to protect the endangered Caretta caretas and to prevent them from extinction. This was the realization of one's responsibilities to nature. Captain June was born in London in 1922. She was a member of a very wealthy family. Her parents had done their best for her. She got training in music, dance, ballet, and painting. But for her, the world wasn't that way. She thought there were too many places to visit besides this shining life. In 1975, she went on a blue journey with a fishing boat and came to Dalian Beach. This blue journey of Captain June has turned into a journey that will benefit humanity. Admiring the unique beauties of Turkey, June thought that immediate actions should be taken to protect these beauties. Dalian, Izduzu Beach, Aegean, Caretta caretas needed such an action. June Heimov left all her possessions, her life, and her youth as a memory in her country. And in 1986, she began to live in Dalian, where she will dedicate her life. She worked hard to learn and teach about Caretta careta's life circle, egg-laying dates, and actions to protect offsprings. She wrote books, sang songs, and organized protests. At the age of 95, she left an eternal legacy to the world and humanity. Our duty is to leave our natural beauties to future generations as a legacy, as we have done so far. Happy birthday, Captain June.